Hi, nurses. Welcome to Shift Change, the podcast for nurses who are ready to shift their thinking away from the just a nurse mentality and into claiming their position as powerful agents for change. I'm your host, Amy Deagle, Chief Nursing Officer and President of the International Network of Nurse Leaders. Our mission at the International Network of Nurse Leaders is to amplify the voice of nurses, inspire the new generation of nurse leaders, and lead a change revolution in the nursing profession. Everything we do is because we believe in the power of nurses to change the world. So let's get started. Hi, nurses. Welcome back to another episode of the Shift Change podcast. I'm your host, Amy Deagle, and I am so excited to be bringing you this interview with Tim Guest. Tim is the president-elect of the Canadian Nurses Association, and he is another interview brought to you courtesy of an introduction via Joanne Peterson. So we're on a roll this month. This is the second guest that has been introduced to me via Joanne. So I just thank Joanne for all of her interactions and her connections. It means the world to me when you guys are reaching out with these nurses that you feel would give value and insight to the community. So please continue to email me with your guest recommendations. I appreciate every one of them that comes to me. And Joanne thought Tim would be an interesting nurse to interview, given that he had just recently lost his nursing position and quite a high up management position. And she felt it was quite timely to bring him on to discuss, how you handle challenges like that when you lose a role, that is not of your deciding. And as Tim will elaborate in the interview, this isn't the first time it's happened to him. And so I just thought with everything that's happening currently in Canada and especially in Alberta, which is where I live, I just thought it was a timely interview to bring you some advice and support and guidance around that specific issue. So I'm really excited to be bringing you Tim. He is a registered nurse with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from the University of Alberta and a Master of Business Administration in Executive Management with specialization in leadership from Royal Roads University. Tim has over 28 years of experience in the Canadian healthcare system, from clinician to senior executive in Alberta and Nova Scotia, including rural, urban, and academic and tertiary settings. Tim's portfolios have included program responsibility for medicine, emergency, critical care, trauma, ambulatory care, surgical services, pathology and laboratory, endoscopy, diagnostic imaging, mental health, maternal child services, rehabilitation, pastoral care, home care, and population health and access and flow. Tim is an accreditation surveyor with Accreditation Canada. He has also been a board member of the College and Association of Registered Nurses of Alberta and College of Registered Nurses of Nova Scotia, and has an adjunct appointment with the Dalhousie University School of Nursing. All right, so welcome, Tim, to the Shift Change podcast. I am just thrilled to have you here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Amy. It's such a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And I'm so excited. You are a guest that was recommended to me through Joanne Peterson, who is a legendary guest on this podcast. So I love it when the worlds come together and I get to meet even more amazing nurses. And I'm really fascinated by your career story and your journey through nursing. So can you tell our audience kind of what your nursing career has looked like and where you are today?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. My career has been a pleasure. I think back over the nearly 30 years that I've been a registered nurse and what I've done and where my career has gone, and it's gone places I never ever saw when I started out, and it's just been fascinating. I started my career volunteering actually in a nursing home, and then prior to starting nursing school, I worked for about a year for a quadriplegic gentleman as a personal care attendant. And then I worked in a nursing home as a nursing attendant for a few months waiting to start. And then also during the summers and Christmas breaks. And I graduated from nursing. I did a diploma program at the time in 1991. And when I graduated, it was during the Ralph Klein era, and there weren't a lot of full-time jobs in Alberta at the time. And so I worked casual in three hospitals. One was very, very small and a small rural hospital. The next one was kind of a medium-sized rural hospital, and then in a regional hospital that was a fairly busy one. And it was really interesting. Things were very different then. Orientation was very short. It was 5 days kind of thing, not weeks that you will see in orientation now. And I had really interesting experiences in those roles while I worked through them as a casual, trying to get on full time. And some of them shaped the nurse that I would be forever. I wanted to be involved when I started my career, and wasn't really sure the best way to do that. And so I remembered when I was in nursing school that we had presentations where people came and spoke with us, and an individual came from the College and Association of Registered Nurses of Alberta at the time, and another person came and spoke with us from the United Nurses of Alberta. And I found the union person was extremely a dynamic speaker. And so it drew my interest there. And so I participated on the local executive in a number of roles with the nurses union, went on to being a member of their board. And then an opportunity came for me to do a temporary management role. And interestingly enough, that really interested me, and I never looked back. I worked in a management way, moving up the ranks, so to speak, into director level role and then into an executive role, which I've spent more than half my career now in an executive role, both in smaller organizations and also in the larger ones. And it's really been interesting to see kind of where my career path's gone. And I also was on the board of two of the regulatory colleges, one in Alberta and in Nova Scotia when my career moved me here. And then I just, when the timing was right, that I got an opportunity to have my name put forward to be on the board of the Canadian Nurses Association, something that I never thought. That was just not something I ever saw myself doing. That was a path that I just didn't foresee as possible. And then was elected president-elect of the Canadian Nurses Association in June of 2018. Just crazy to think that this person that grew up in rural, small Alberta, that I could end up there.
That's incredible. So I have to ask, where in rural, small town Alberta did you grow up?
I grew up in the northwest corner of Alberta, in and around Grand Prairie.
Oh, okay. Yep. So you are very familiar with rural and remote nursing.
I am.
Awesome. I grew up small town Alberta as well, about 600 people, but definitely not quite as remote as up near Grand Prairie. So we have connections through the rural nursing. So Tim, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and we've had a couple other male nurses on the podcast as well, and I'm so interested in their experience, and especially you being an early 90s nurse, what your experience was like getting into nursing and then your trajectory into leadership. Because I've heard from a few of the other guests that they didn't have some of the same, let's say, roadblocks, and they weren't met with the same resistance that some of the female guests have had when they've been trying to navigate into leadership. And so I'm interested to know what your experience was like.
It was, I probably moved into my roles very quickly. If you think about it, I moved into an executive role. I was in my early 40s when I first moved into my first executive position. And when I think back about, what were some of the factors that led me there, and, did being male impact that? I don't think it did. I had female bosses most of my career and learned a lot from them. Mm-hmm. And when I think about what happened along the way, and I think it was my mindset, mm-hmm. kind of my philosophy that I have worked from my whole career. And I think those have been things that have impacted my getting where I am. And some of those things have been, there's never a perfect time for everything, for anything, really. Mm-hmm. You're never going to feel perfectly qualified to do any role. Any role you do in your career, you're going to have to learn. And the time to actually make the decision about whether a new role is right for you is not at the time of applying. It's when you actually get offered it. Mm-hmm. Until you actually get offered it, you don't have a decision. Mm-hmm. And so don't minimize yourself by not applying. Apply. You have lots of time to think about whether the thing's right for you after you go through the process and get to learn more about it. And those are some of the things I've done. I've applied for executive level roles and director roles. Did I have all the confidence to feel that I had everything I needed in order to do those? Not when I applied for them. It's about taking a chance. And I think you need to not minimize what you have to offer. Mm-hmm. And take a chance. There was lots of no's along the way. My career path wasn't filled with yeses that every single job I ever wanted I got. That's not how it was. I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time, and I was willing to take on the challenge, and it worked out.
I love that. And I love what you said about the mindset that, just take the risk. And we talk a lot about that in the membership community and on previous podcasts about just, you don't have to have all the qualifications. If you're feeling called to a position, just take the courage and apply for it. You never know where that's going to lead or what doors that could open. You don't have to tick all those boxes. There is some data support that, men feel more easily able to apply for things that they're not totally qualified for. But I think it really is about a mindset. And what is the worst that can happen? They're going to say no. Well, you still have the same job you have then, right? It's worth putting yourself out there to just take the risk.
Yeah, I think that's very true. The reality of it is men and women are, we are wired a little bit differently. And sometimes I think as men, our egos do allow us to be more comfortable with some risk than I think women. And maybe that is a factor in how we make those decisions. Do I think that I moved up into roles where women didn't have the same opportunity? And when I think back of all the roles that I ever applied for, interestingly enough, a couple of them, there was only males who had applied for them. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't compete with women, but there were certainly roles along the way that I did compete with women and they got them. And so, it's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to really dive into and look at. And I don't think there's one right answer. It's just something that as guests have been talking about their career paths, it's been an interesting thing that I've noted. So I want to talk about navigating career changes because you've held many different roles throughout your nursing career. And that's one of the benefits of being a nurse is we can pivot and transition our career and try a bunch of different things on and see what really fits and works for us. And when you're kind of, bored with one area, you're not growing or challenging yourself, you can pivot into something else still within the nursing umbrella. And that's one of the greatest things about this career. And I want to talk about, though, navigating career changes when they're maybe not necessarily your decision. So mm-hmm. dealing with layoffs, dealing with, positions just not being available anymore. Can you walk us through your point of view from navigating career changes that, like I said, aren't your choice?
Well, certainly, interestingly enough, I'm living that situation right now. Mm-hmm. In my career, I've gone through a number of restructuring sorts of events and events with cuts. When I started my career out, when I was in a unionized direct care nursing role, I was bumped. And I went from a full-time job in ICU, and the only way I could stay full-time was to take a full-time job in psychiatry. Massive change. Wow. I learned a lot. I grew. When I moved into my executive level aspect of my career, I've been restructured 3 times. That led me to take on different challenges where I moved across the country to be able to stay in an executive level role. And, my decision making when I did that was I wanted a job that spoke to me mm-hmm. and that I wanted to feel like I could make a difference and that I felt that the values of the organization and the role matched with mine and where I wanted to go. I've been I was restructured in Nova Scotia. This is my second time. And so I'm back on the job market. It's stressful. It's hard to say that it's not. It is. I like change. And so these circumstances have pushed me to do new things and try new things. And I have to say that my career has really moved forward, and I have done things I never ever thought I would. Had I not moved to Nova Scotia and stayed in Alberta, would I have done some of the things I've done here? I bet not. I have had great opportunity to participate in provincial policy. I've presented at legislative committees. I've presented to Treasury Board. I presented to Cabinet. Who would have thought that this nurse from Grand Prairie, Alberta would be in the Premier's office doing, speaking about issues. I got the opportunity to be on the board of the National Professional Association. Would I have done that had I stayed? I don't know. My career has gone places that I never thought that it would. And all of those things were because I had a circumstance that came up that I had no ability to control, but had to make the best of it. And it's about not being afraid to try something new, and being flexible, and I really believe that good comes from change that sometimes we don't expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I found in my career is that you don't know what area necessarily is going to be the perfect fit for you until you're in it. Right? We can say like, oh yeah, no, I really think I'll like the emergency department. And then, you are actually working in it and you're like, oh, actually, that's not actually a good fit for me. Some of those things that we think we can know just based on our personalities and stuff, until you're actually trying those different roles, you don't actually know if it's going to be a good fit for you. I never thought I would be in a, primary care management role. I thought I'd be labor and delivery my entire life. I went to school for a certified nurse midwife. My entire life had been about babies and delivering babies, and I did that for 9 months, and it was the worst 9 months of my life. And so, until I was actually doing it, though, I didn't know that wasn't going to be the right fit. And so same thing like you're saying, like maybe a change is a good, not maybe, change will be a good thing. And you may launch into the next thing that you didn't even know was going to be the perfect fit for you.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's one of the fantastic things about nursing is that, if we feel like we're ready for a change or that we've done something for a while and it's not challenging us as much as we want it to, we can do something else where we don't have to change our whole career. Mm-hmm. When I think back of my career, I have not done a lot of specific jobs where I've been in them for more than 5-year installments or increments. Mm-hmm. But I've stayed with the same employer for, I think I've only had 3 employers in my whole career. And so you can have, job security, and you can stay at a place long enough to build up your pension, yet have change. And if you're one of these nurses that loves challenges and is interested in doing different things, you can do travel nursing, and there's all kinds of things you can do where you're not stuck in one place. And I think that one of the things that I've learned is every role that I have been in has left me with something that has helped me in the next. They don't have to be the same clinical setting, but they have left me with skills that I've been able to take forward and that have been really valuable in future roles that I have been in.
Yeah, and I agree. It's the amazing thing about choosing nursing as a career is you have so many options available to you, and options that are only going to grow. We had a guest on here, Dan Weberg. He's out of the States, and he's working with innovation and technology and how that's going to evolve the nursing profession. But they need nurses in on those type of counseling roles. So he was actually, the liaison with like Google and Apple in their tech sectors. Like it's amazing what positions nurses will be stepping into now and in the future that we've never even thought of.
Yeah, well, I think nursing is such an untapped resource. There are so many things that we can be doing that we aren't, that could have huge impacts on society. I think one of the things that I was going to say, Amy, is that, when I think about leadership, and I've been in leadership roles for a long time, and I think about the whole concept of leadership. And, the reason this came to my mind is I was doing a presentation with a group of fourth year nursing students from Yarmouth, and one of them asked me if they could ever be me. And I found it was such a profound question. And the response that came to my mind is like, why not? And I think when I think about leadership, and maybe one of the things that I'd like to get across with the listeners of your podcast is I've used leadership skills at every single step in every role I've had along the way. Mm-hmm. And each one of them has helped me grow and become more skilled as a leader, with more experience and the more education that I have had. Titles are irrelevant. Any nurse is a leader and practices and provides leadership in the roles they're in. Managers don't own it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important thing for nurses to conceptualize. We all have the capacity to be that, and we all do it every day, even though we don't think we are.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're preaching to the choir here because, our mission and vision is that every nurse is a leader. And how do we use those everyday acts of leadership to help change the world? And that's really what nurses are in a key position to do, is use those opportunities of profound impact that we can have on patients, on colleagues, on our communities, and really use them to put out kindness and compassion and empathy and connection. Because that's, to me, what the new wave of leadership is going to be, is people that model those type of attributes. Hey nurses, I just wanted to take a quick break from the podcast and tell you about something really important that's happening. So 2020 has been designated as Year of the Nurse and the Midwife. And it's really great to be celebrating nurses and to be sharing trending hashtags. But what we really need to do is get into action, because it's up to us. And nothing is going to change if we don't make the change. So there's a movement happening, and it needs you. We're stronger together. So come join us as we disrupt the status quo and evolve our profession. It's time. We are stronger together, so let's get started. If you want to know how you can join this movement of change, visit nurseleaders.ca/2020nurse to opt in for a free 3-part video series about how we can use 2020, the Year of the Nurse and Midwife, as the year we finally use our collective voice and lead our profession forward. So jump over to nurseleaders.ca/2020nurse for all the details. Now back to the episode. A lot of new nurses, and we have a lot of new grads and young nurses that listen to this podcast that say, they didn't even realize that leadership was a thing they could do within nursing. And, maybe they're thinking of more official type management roles. But I want to talk about that everyday acts of leadership and how nurses at any stage of their career can get involved in leadership, and really what that means to you when you see nurses modeling leadership in any role.
It's an interesting question. And when I think about it, my chief nurse executive hat kind of goes on. And when I've talked with groups of nurses and nursing students and new graduates in the past, when I think back of some of the things of what I've said, and to me, it's about getting involved. It's about having a voice. It's about sometimes taking a stand. It's about participating. It's about, volunteering to take a student when students are coming. It's about being willing to orient a new person to make them feel welcome and help them transition into your unit or your hospital. It's about participating in quality initiatives. It's about speaking up when we don't agree with things and sharing suggestions on how we can make them better. It's about being willing to look at a policy and helping update it. It's about agreeing to be on a project or a committee, or more formal things like being an educator or a team leader. And it could be things like getting involved in your professional association on a committee, or running for a leadership role. It's about participating as a leader in your union if you belong to one, or your regulatory college. It can be any of those things. I think it's just being willing to and interested in participating in more than just going to work, doing your work, and going home. Mm-hmm. I think it's like I said before, it's kind of how we show up and how we participate and being willing to want to change the world.
Mm-hmm. And I'm really glad you mentioned, getting into provincial leadership roles with union or regulatory colleges, joining your professional nursing association. As the president-elect of the Canadian Nurses Association, can you tell nurses that are interested in getting into those either provincial leadership roles or even national leadership roles, what a good kind of plan of action would be? What steps can they take if they are kind of feeling a pull towards those type of roles?
Yeah, so when I think back of how I went about that, I volunteered to be on a committee. My first committee that I was ever on was in Alberta at the College and Association of Registered Nurses. And that allowed me to have some exposure. I thought I actually understood what the professional association and the college did. Certainly I've become way more aware of that. There's a lot of confusion in our profession between what is the role of the union and what's the role of the regulatory college and what's the role of the professional association and what value do each of them bring and do we need them all? And I think we need to educate ourselves to have a better understanding of them, because I think we will show much more value in what they actually bring for us. And then I think people might be more interested in participating. You can certainly put your name forward and run for a geographic rep on the councils of those organizations. You would not believe how many organizations across the province that those roles get acclaimed, or that they have to go begging for people to put their name forward because there isn't interest. There's so many opportunities to participate in our profession. And those are good ways. You don't have to be a nurse that's been around for 20, 30 years to put your name forward to be on council of your regulatory college. You can do it in the first year if you want to. We're not limited to when we can participate, which I think is a really exciting thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that younger nurses don't necessarily know, that there is no requirement. So this year, actually, I went to the CARNA annual general meeting because they were talking about nursing leadership, which is obviously a passion of mine. And, happened to meet Joanne Peterson there for the first time, and Barb Shellian and Claire Becker actually as well. And sat next to Denny, who's the president of CARNA. And she said, you talk this leadership game and, you have an interest in it. Why don't you apply for or let your name stand for the Central Provincial Counselor position? And I didn't even know that was a thing. Yeah. I'm in nursing leadership and I had no idea I could just stick my name up to run for provincial council. And talking of, acclimated positions, I was acclimated into the role of provincial council because nobody ran against me for Central. But again, just as you mentioned, I signed up for, I'm going to be this advocate for the nurses in Central Zone. This is going to be amazing. And the rally cry. And they sat us down on the first day and they said, well, your role as governance is really the regulatory piece as well as the association, but that protecting the public and regulatory function is kind of the big piece of it. And I was like, oh, I had no idea what I was signing up for. So, yeah. But it's one of those things, you jump in and you figure it out as you go, and nobody's going to say, oh, you're perfectly ordained, you're ready, here you go, here's the magical path. You just have to jump before you're ready and trust in yourself that you will figure it out and learn as you go along.
Yeah, well, and I think you brought up a really good example of how change is impacting our profession. There's a growing storm kind of going across the country where there's this separation of professional associations and regulatory functions, and a lot of these organizations going solely to regulatory functions. It's happened in British Columbia. It's happened in Nova Scotia. It happened in Ontario eons ago. And certainly we're hearing more of that. And I think it creates this situation that we need to be even more involved and more diligent as there's a risk that we lose our professional voice with these changes. And, we need nurses to get involved and want to participate. We need nurses to see the value and want to actually belong as members of these associations for them to be viable.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions. And again, until March, had no idea the difference between the college and the association. Well, actually, not even March. When was my first meeting? September is when I really realized what the difference between the college and association was. And so it just lends the importance of organizations like the Canadian Nurses Association, that it's our national voice. And in Canada, CNA has a really good relationship with federal government, that they do value our opinion. And I know in a lot of countries that's not necessarily the same. But if we lose that national voice that actually advocates for the nurses, we're going to be in trouble. Nurses in Canada are seen as leaders right now across the world in how advanced our scope of practices are and our autonomy and those sorts of things. And it would be a huge disservice to the nurses in Canada if we were to lose that voice.
Yeah, in the world, Canadian nursing is held in very high esteem and very much are seen as leaders. And there are nurses in other countries who wish they could work in environments and practice the way we do. It's one of those things that so exciting. I think about 2020 as such an interesting year. The World Health Organization has identified it as the year of the nurse and midwife, and there's all kinds of interesting celebrations that people are talking about wanting to plan, and lots of conversations with governments and trying to make nursing a higher priority. And there's such an opportunity for us as leaders in nursing to push the profile of nursing up. I fundamentally believe that nursing is the answer to our health system access woes. Mm-hmm. We can be so much more than we are. And that's the way to do it, is for us to assert our value to decision makers so that they see us in a different light, so that we can function different than we have functioned in the past.
Absolutely. And that's, one of the things we offer through the International Network of Nurse Leaders is we're running a Year of the Nurse Challenge. And it's great to celebrate nursing and to, use the trending hashtags and that sort of thing. But what are we doing that actually moves our profession forward and raises that profile of nurses? And so we started a 3-part video series. It's a free opt-in challenge for any nurse all over the world that they can opt in, and it gives them some tangible things they can start doing and then leads them through a bit more as they become more comfortable with speaking out. And it's at nurseleaders.ca/2020nurse. And it's really about getting us into activity and using those skills that we have as nurses that translate into leadership skills to really make sure that we make 2020 Year of the Nurse, and we don't just use it as a, trending hashtag every once in a while, that we're actually making change and we're speaking to the public and we're showcasing our value and we're, getting into the media and we're showing how nurses can change the world.
I completely agree. When I think about what are some of the barriers and challenges that are facing the nursing profession right now, and how do they impact how we move forward? And I've had lots of opportunity to talk to nurses both here in Nova Scotia and as I have had more opportunity to travel across the country, and some of what I hear from them as challenges is certainly the aging of our workforce. We're not educating enough people to come along behind us, particularly in some specific places like academia, specialty nursing practice, and some nursing leadership roles are very hard to fill. If you think about, your experience on the Council for CARNA, that people aren't putting their name forward to participate in these nursing leadership opportunities. Our places are also becoming more of a challenge. Mm-hmm. Change is harder to manage. The technology change is so rapid that we're being dragged along behind. And I think largely because we've not actually prepared ourselves in how we incorporate it into our practice and maximize it. Violence that nurses are experiencing in the workplace is worsening. Mm-hmm. And the expectations of the people that we care for is changing. I think our system's becoming much more Americanized. And I think back to the thing that you had just said is, in a way, in some ways, I think as nursing, we're having a bit of an identity crisis. We can't articulate very well what we do. We tend to be fairly passive in our approach. And I don't think sometimes we vocalize our views, our concerns. And I think that impacts the contribution that we are or could be making. Mm-hmm. And we need to solve those challenges. And I think, one of the ways of that is we need to be more solution focused. We need to be more positive. I think we need to be more innovative. I think that we need to unite into one voice. And when I say that, I'm talking about all of the regulatory nursing groups, the licensed the practical nurses, the nurse practitioners, the psychiatric nurses, and the registered nurses. We have been separate and at odds for far too long. And I think others have capitalized on that. And I think we this is going to sound so cliche, but we need to be willing to take the bull by the horns if we're going to forge a new path for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that means that we need to be much more comfortable being maybe more forceful or maybe even aggressive in how we communicate the value of our profession to others.
Yeah, the Gallup poll just was released the other day, and nurses again rank as the most trusted profession in the world, but it's a blind trust, because if you actually ask people what we do, they have a very small idea, unless they've been directly impacted by a nurse or have a nurse in the family. The public places this blind trust in us, but we've done a really poor job of actually communicating our value. So that things like funding, when funding cuts are proposed, we should have, entire communities upset by that. And instead it's kind of like, oh yeah, this happens every, so many years. But if people truly understood the impact of what it means to reduce the nursing workforce and what it means to them and their loved ones' care, I think we'd have a lot more upset people when things like that happen.
I completely agree. When you think about it, we are at a point in our history where nurses are the most educated they have ever been. Their capability and capacity is higher than it has ever been. The opportunity that we have in order to participate and the potential that we can be a solution to challenges that the health system across the world is facing. And we have this situation. We are the most trusted profession by our public, and we don't maximize it. Mm-hmm. Like, why?
I don't know. And that's actually one of the questions I was going to ask. We are the most trusted profession. We're not the most influential. So what are some things that we can do every day that help us increase our influence? Especially in terms of policy and decision making, because I know that you've been involved in policy and presenting at those levels of government. So are there any suggestions that you have for what we can do to start moving our voice forward?
So there's kind of three kind of thoughts I have on that. And it's about using our voice, and we needing to do it in a professional way, bringing forward evidence and confidence. And I think it's about how we present ourselves sometimes. I think we need to stop apologizing for being nurses, and we need to be more forceful in getting our messages out. And I think we need to be doing a better job of articulating our value to then expect to be seen as a potential solution.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean, you're again preaching to the choir, because the International Network of Nurse Leaders hosted not just a nurse day, and I have just in air quotations, even though nobody can see me doing it. And it featured nurses from all over the world who, really stood up and said, I'm a nurse. And they wore it like a badge of honor instead of saying, oh, I'm just the nurse. And putting that just a nurse in front of it just downplays our importance, and it downplays our value. And one of the biggest things we need to do in 2020 is shed that just the nurse piece and really claim our position as leaders. So why do you think it's so prevalent that we are just a nurse mentality?
I think that has largely come from our history. When you think about the system and the structures of those systems that we have evolved from, they were largely led by males largely led by physicians in the past. Our profession has long been a female-dominated one in a society that not that long ago didn't even consider them persons. Is there any wonder we're carrying this baggage along? We really need to allow ourselves to let that go. And I think we need to move forward in new ways. Certainly when we're CNA, we're doing some engagement sessions across the country with members and potential members. And one of the things that we have heard is nurses want us to get out there and communicate our positions in ways that are much stronger, that they believe that we have been far too passive up to now, and that we really need to show people that we are more than just nurses, that we actually have something to offer society, that we are a solution for some of the challenges facing society, and that we need to stop apologizing for being nurses and celebrating the fact that we're nurses, that we bring tremendous value to the societies in which we live.
Yep, I agree. And that piece around just stop being so nice, like really claim our positions. And it was interesting because one of the things I had talked about early in the International Network of Nurse Leaders launching was this thing of like, we need to take care of ourselves. Self-care for nurses isn't selfish, and healthier nurses will equal healthier patients. And some pretty high-level nurses said, yeah, that sounds okay, but don't say that too loudly because we wouldn't want to appear to be self-serving as a profession. We're about the public. And yes, we are here for patient care and to serve the public. But if we are broken and not healthy and we're not even taking the breaks to eat and pee on a 12-hour shift, like how are we expected to give great patient care? And so I think really that piece is we need to stop worrying about what people might think of us and stop trying to be so nice and really claim our power and say, this is important. If you guys want us to provide great care, then we need to be healthy. And these are some things we need in our environments to make sure that happens. There isn't another profession out there that would be okay with going 12 hours without even getting, time to sit and eat.
I agree. I think you've really nailed an issue that I think is happening in our workplaces right now. And, at CNA, one of the things that we are planning for 2020 is a change with how we're doing our biennial convention. And the theme of our biennial convention in 2020 is take care of nurses to take charge of health. And I think it's going to be an exciting opportunity for nurses to get together and learn from each other and have conversations with each other, and also allow the Canadian Nurses Association to hear directly from them and participating in a different way. And there's kind of 4 headings that are 4 sub-themes in the conference, and it's their health and wellness of practice settings, intra-professional collaboration, self-care, and resilience in health systems and care settings. And it's really about that. It's about how do we make sure that we are together working in environments that allow us to be the best that we can be, because we can't be the best for our patients and our clients and our communities if we're working unhealthy, if we have stressful situations where we've got broken relationships. We can't expect to be able to deliver the best care if we don't focus on working in environments that are the best as well. Other industries have done great at this. We need to be willing to look at them, and we need to bust this "we eat our young" thing.
Yes, and actually I was going to say that, one of that pieces of self-care and being healthier nurses and having healthier work environments is flipping our culture. And I usually ask guests about this, expression, nurses eat their young. And I've had a lot of feedback come through social media, direct messages, and through emails saying, yeah, there's not just this culture of nurses eat their young anymore. It's this culture of like nurses are eating each other. So the young ones are now seeing no value in nurses that have 25 years experience because they're not catching on to the technology as much. And we have this, for some reason, almost like a competition with each other. So I was speaking to a nurse the other day, and And she was saying, I really want to go out and get this extra training, but I'm scared to tell anybody at work because they're going to think I'm better than them, or they're not going to be supportive, or, they're going to bring all my fears to the forefront and not support me on that. And I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay stuck. So why do you think we have that culture in nursing, and any ideas on how we work to fix it?
I don't know the why. I wish I did, because I think it would make fixing it easier. I think, some of it is that, we need to just get over ourselves a little bit. We need to give each other a break, and I think we need to support each other. And I think sometimes maybe it's about competition. It's about, our history and not wanting to be seen as less than. When you think about, I'll give you an example, when we moved to a baccalaureate entry to practice, the competition between diploma prepared nurses and degree prepared nurses and the value that each other saw. And I have to be honest, I had to eat some crow as a diploma prepared nurse, having conversations with my degree prepared colleagues along the way. I did not realize until I did my post-RN degree that I actually thought differently. And it's not a bad thing if we want to learn and develop ourselves. We should celebrate it and we should support it, and we should not look down at people because they have made different choices. I don't think that it's bad if I was a diploma prepared nurse and I have wanted to I've wanted to continue to be a diploma prepared nurse, and because maybe my life circumstances or my family circumstances didn't give me the opportunity to advance that, even though I may have wanted to. We have to accept the fact that we all learn different. We all think different. We have different approaches and different strengths as to how we respond to situations. And I think we're becoming much more aware, with new evidence about how people learn and their styles and how they interact with others and how our styles impact each other in groups and teams. We need to actually recognize those things and use some of that evidence that we now have to allow ourselves to interact, work, function differently, and appreciate each other for what we bring, rather than use some of those differences as ways to bring each other down.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things you said, like we learn differently, we think differently, and we have different aspirations, right? Not everybody has the same career trajectory or path or the same goals and ambitions, and there's room for everybody. And just going back to that thing that you mentioned about, the RNs and the LPNs and the registered psych nurses and the nurse practitioners all coming together because we are stronger together. And, the new data is saying we're going to be like 9 million nurses short by 2030. That's only 10 years away. There is room for everybody. There is room for all the nurses, but we need to make sure that we communicate our value and make the, governing authorities realize how valuable nurses are and show how we can all work together to fill that need.
I completely agree. There is more than enough work to go around. And I think we need to all be able to speak to the value that we all bring, not just ourselves, but we need to also be able to understand the value that the other regulated groups that are part of nursing can bring, and recognize that it's not about which one's better. It's about we all can play in the sandbox, and we all bring value and meaningful participation to the work that in the caring that people need, and we need to adapt. We need to be comfortable of moving into new places that maybe we weren't before. And I think some nurses, we look at the licensed practical nurses as a good example, in the last 10 years have done a great job of moving forward their profession into new areas of practice. We need the whole profession doing that.
Yeah, I agree. So, Tim, the vision statement of the International Network of Nurse Leaders, I've mentioned it several times today, is that we believe in the power of nurses to change the world. So what do you think of that statement? And in your opinion, are there some issues, like issues or social justice platforms, those types of things that nurses could put their collective voice behind to really make a difference?
Give me the statement again.
We believe in the power of nurses to change the world.
Such a powerful statement, but I totally agree. When you think about how many of us there are, I think there's near 20 million nurses worldwide, and, nearly 450 almost nurses of all regulatory groups in Canada. What voice we could bring, and how much we could influence policy, and how much we could influence change if we did. When you think about it, like, how many physicians are there in the country? Not even a very small percentage in comparison to what nurses bring. Look at the voice that they bring in health policy and the influence they have. We need to move ourselves forward into that. We have the knowledge. We have valuable perspectives on solutions to some of the challenges that health systems are making. We just need to become more comfortable in being out there and doing it.
So just as this session or conversation has flown by, Tim, so as we are drawing to a close today, what are some things that you see happening today that make you proud to be a nurse and proud of where our profession is heading?
When I see nurses being more involved in decision making, and I see amazing things that nurses do, when you see the YouTube videos of nurses that do these amazing things. I can think of a couple of examples where nurses there's been YouTube videos of nurses that have brought instruments in and used this talented that they have as singers into the way they deliver care and how it impacts the patients and families that they look after. I think it's being innovative in how we do what we do. It's the nurses that are choosing to work in these remote, isolated communities and the impact that they have on the communities that they work in. Often, sometimes being the only caregiver and health practitioner that population has access to, and the knowledge and skills that they have to have in order to function in those communities. It's also the nurses that have chosen to run for public office and bring that nursing perspective to those roles as municipal councillors and members of legislative assemblies and members of parliament. That have had the opportunity to talk with nurses that have run for election and how they've impacted that. And when I think about the work that nurse researchers and innovators are doing and coming up with new knowledge to move ourselves forward, there's just so much potential. We're moving into new roles, like with the move to start incorporating RN prescribing more, and you see nurses doing things that they didn't historically do. It's so exciting to think about. The sky's the limit. We're only limited by our own imagination. And I just love seeing it when nurses take that initiative and move us forward and try new things. And I'm so invigorated when I sit down with a group of new graduates. It is amazing, the youth that are going into nursing now. They are so smart. Some of them have PhDs when they go into nursing school, and just these brilliant minds. I just think about where our profession is going to go as they move through the ranks. It's just so exciting.
I love it. All right. So, Tim, to wrap up, do you think you can provide our audience and the listeners today with 3 tangible takeaways or pieces of advice that you have for them?
3 tangibles are taking our advice. I would say, don't ever be afraid of a challenge. There is never going to be a perfect time, and grab onto something that you fundamentally believe in or strongly believe in, and use it as a catalyst to be involved. you allow your voice to allow that thing, that subject matter, that idea to move us forward. I think if every nurse had a passion about a specific thing and got involved in how that thing could be changed, how it could be better, we could change the world.
Mm-hmm. I so agree. All right. So I just want to thank you, Tim, for being here today. And we have one last request from you before we wrap up today. And that's to tell us a story from your nursing career that had an impact on you.
A story that had an impact on me. I think about experiences along the way that I have had that shaped the type of nurse that I would become. And the ones that come to mind are some of those experiences when I was a direct care nurse. And they have very much impacted my belief in always having to have the patient, family, or community, whoever it is in the type of nursing we do, as our focus be front and center. And it's about how I, as a nurse at the time, was able to participate and help those individuals through a very difficult circumstance that they were having at the time. An example was I was looking after a woman who had a stillbirth, and she was 40 years old-ish at the time, hadn't really wanted to have children, and very much had taken time to grapple with the fact that she was going to be a parent late in life, and was she happy about this, and then to have it taken away. And I had the opportunity, because I was a float nurse, to care for this woman, both in labor and delivery when she was finding out that she had the stillbirth, and also on the postpartum unit after. And working with her to have a decision whether to go through the decision-making process as to whether she would see the pictures of this baby. She didn't want to. And to have some of those difficult conversations and help her through this grieving process. And to a year later to be working in the recovery room and have this woman come in post-cesarean section with her second baby and have her yell across the room to me, "It was a boy." Aww. Have her remember me. Those experiences have stayed with me my entire career. Mm-hmm. And something that I thought was just what I was supposed to do that day, that it had an impact on her and really made me think about how important every moment is.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And it's a perfect example of how we as nurses have the opportunities to be leaders every day. By taking that extra moment, that extra care, that extra compassion, we can change somebody's life or be part of a huge pivotal moment in their lives every day if we just take that opportunity. And we never know what that ripple effect can be. So seize those opportunities. I love that. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Tim. I am just honored that you would take the time to sit here and chat with me.
This has been fun. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. All right. So as always, if you're interested in joining our Year of the Nurse Challenge, just go to nurseleaders.ca/2020nurse. And we will be back next week with a new episode. Thanks, Tim. Hi, nurses. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Shift Change podcast. I want to take a moment and talk to you about something really important that's happening this year. As you probably know, World Health Organization designated 2020 as Year of the Nurse and Midwife. And while it's important to celebrate the nurses and participate in all these events that are happening, we need to make sure that we are being strategic about making this the year that we really use our collective voice to raise the profile and status of nurses and advance our profession. Understandably, some of you may feel resistance to this call to action. After all, how can we expect nurses to raise the profile and status of nurses and advance the profession when oftentimes nurses aren't even getting a proper break to sit down, eat something, or even use the bathroom on their shift? But you know what? If we don't act and act now, nothing will ever change. No one is coming to save the nursing profession from the burnout and exhaustion, from the staffing crises and nursing shortage, from the violence and bullying, from the budget cuts and all the other threats to our profession that we are currently facing. Only we can save ourselves. And that can only happen when we decide enough is enough. We must decide that this is the year that we are going to use our collective voice to shout our value to the world, to introduce innovative and revolutionary ideas into healthcare, to advocate for our patients and our profession, to shed the just a nurse mentality and claim our position as leaders, and in doing so, change our profession. This year, 2020, Year of the Nurse and the Midwife, you get to decide. Is this the year that everything changes? Is this the year that we finally say enough is enough and break through the status quo? Is this the year that you, yes, each one of you, decide that you are tired of just complaining and actually put in the work to make a change? Because the truth is, it is up to us. And nothing changes if no one changes. Let me say that again. Nothing changes if no one changes. There is a movement happening and it needs you. We are stronger together. Come join us as we disrupt the status quo and evolve our profession. It's time. It's our time. We're stronger together, so let's get started. If you want to know how you can join the movement of change, visit nurseleaders.ca/2020nurse to opt in for a free 3-part video series about how we can use 2020, the year of the nurse and midwife, as the year we use our collective voice and lead our profession forward. So jump on over to nurseleaders.ca/2020nurse for all the details. I'll see you over there.